here we are. Hello, everybody. My name is Jay Frost, and if I haven't mentioned before, welcome to the DonorSearch Philanthropy Masterminds series. And today we're going to have a great discussion with a person who's definitely a leader in our field. If you don't know her, I'll be introducing her to you in a moment. But mainly, I'm here to use up a little oxygen for a moment as all of you come into our space, make yourselves comfortable for what we hope is a great conversation, not just between the two of us, but also with you. So we do want to hear from you today, and the principal way that you can participate, since we can't see you or hear you, unfortunately, is through our Q&A section. So you'll see on your page that there's a little area where you can go ahead and enter questions at any time. Also use that for commenting, please. And we may even ask you a question from time to time, so that's a great place to respond to us. So do make use of that throughout. We really do want to hear from you. Also, you'll see that there's something on your page where you can tell us what you think about this session, so do rate at the end if you would. There's a little information on speaker biography, and we are asked from time to time about DonorSearch. That's not the purpose of these sessions. DonorSearch is kind enough to provide a platform where we can have real conversations about real topics that affect you. So while we love DonorSearch and the fact that they do this, we won't be talking about them today unless our guest mentions them. But if you want to learn more, and I would encourage you to do that, go ahead and click the link if you're interested in DonorSearch. They'll be happy to show you their products and services. They're good friends of us in the sector, and I'm sure you'll find them a good friend to you. But with that, what I want to do is, of course, flip over here a little bit and introduce our guest to you, and that is Poonam Prasad. And Poonam, hello, Poonam.
Hi.
And Poonam has been in the field for a long time, but if you're unfamiliar with her work, I'm going to take a moment to try and digest a little bit of her biography for you. She is the founder and president, as you probably already know, of her eponymous firm, Prasad Consulting and Research, a firm which has been providing board and staff training, advanced research, audits, major gifts, capital campaign counsel, and publication services to over 100, I think well over 100, local, national, and international nonprofits from her offices in New York, for quite a number of years. I'm sure she'll tell you a little bit more about the firm in a few minutes. She has served on or served on the executive committee of the Giving Institute, where she is currently. And if you don't know the Giving Institute, you definitely want to. They're the people who, among other things, publish Giving USA, our Bible in the sector. She's on the advisory committee of Women of Color in Fundraising and Philanthropy, and on the program committee of the Association of Fundraising Professionals Fundraising Day in New York, where she's been involved for many years, programming a lot of the best material at those conferences, not just in New York, but really of any conference in the country. She's also served on the faculty of the Master of Science in Nonprofit Management program at Columbia, as well as serving as an adjunct professor of philanthropy and fundraising at NYU's Heyman Jr. Center of Philanthropy and Fundraising for over 15 years. She's a past president of Women in Development New York, and she served on numerous boards. I can't list them all right here, or else I would take up too much of her time. But she also goes way back in the field to her days when she first started as a journalist, and among other things, writing poetry. But I know she doesn't want to talk about that, so we won't. But I do want to welcome, with great enthusiasm, our friend Poonam Prasad. Thanks so much for hanging out today, Poonam.
Thank you, Jay. It's such a pleasure from our days back when you worked at the International Rescue Committee to now. What a lovely, long friendship we have had, and I'm so pleased to talk with you. Very nice. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, of course. Yes. It's great to have the excuse to talk with you again. And I know that the topic that you were interested in addressing today, of course, is this one about making the most of the new year-end donors, which is always a big topic for all of us in the sector. But I don't want to assume why that's so. So I'd like to just ask you, why is it important to do something about them?
Thanks, Jay. That's really, it is a matter much on my mind these days. And as you know, the amount that people are giving to charity is increasing, but the number of donors is decreasing. So as you know, if you look on the bright side, philanthropy is flourishing. If you want to look on the glasses half empty side, it's not so good that the number of donors are becoming fewer and fewer. And so you would think in that situation, anybody who gives for the first time would be very important to any charity, given that that's the point. But even worse, if you look at the new statistics from the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, only 20% of donors who gave to you, new donors who gave to you at the year end or throughout last year, are going to give to you again. That means out of 100 donors who gave to you, only 20 will ever give you again. So, or if you have only 20 new donors, only 4 will ever give to you again. So whatever charity you are, whatever type of organization, nonprofit organization you are, it really behooves you to not just worry about bringing in new donors, but retaining the donors that you brought in. And if you don't do that, you're spending a lot more money finding new donors every year. So this is why this topic is so important, because whatever you can do to not lose those donors, to make them give again, to cultivate them, to shower them with love and attention, is so important. And as this is the month of February, it's the month of love, and it's also a depressing month. I know T.S. Eliot said April is the cruelest month, but I think February is pretty much, right? Very. And the news is not so good. So if you can thank your donors and recognize them and research them. So when I used to teach, I still teach, but my students, I would say you need to be a fundraising star. And what does it take to be a fundraising star? Of course, you need to solicit, because without that you get nowhere. But then you need to thank, acknowledge, and then there were a few R's. There were the 4 R's of retention. So solicit, you have to ask.
Right.
Thanking and acknowledging, hopefully you have an automatic acknowledgement, but you won't believe it. I have made 2 gifts last year I have not been acknowledged for at all.
At
And it's an
all. Anything
organization
at all.
at all, at all, at all. And they were, by my standards, large gifts for me. And acknowledgement, of course, the tax receipt. I haven't got the tax receipt. I'm still trying to get them to send me the tax receipt.
Wow.
Uh, and so the 4 R's of retention, this is my new mantra, is
Hmm.
research. And that research doesn't have to be researching. Of course, we would use DonorSearch or any other tools like that eventually. But if you don't have those tools, at least look in your database. Look at the person's address. Don't just go by the name. Look at the person's address. Look at how they came in. What aspect of your program did they give to if they restricted the gift? And who brought them in? Did they give to you because they sat at somebody's table? Are they known to one of your board members? It's so much easier to contact somebody if you know how they came into your program, how they started to give to you.
Mm-hmm.
So the 4 R's are research, report back, re-engage. It's not enough that you ask them once. You've got to re-engage them now,
Right.
and then recognize them. It's I think we may have talked about this, but the tax deduction in the old days, we always thought, well, people give to nonprofits, partly of course they care about you, but partly they were getting this supposedly good tax deduction.
Hmm.
Now the tax deduction is not as valuable as it was before, especially for the middle income, you know, upper middle income donor. So you can't rely on that. That's not the reason they're giving. They could give, because the tax deduction has less value, they could use that money for anything else, including giving to politics, where they get no tax deduction at all. And
Right.
we have seen that a lot of donors have moved over from giving to charity. They feel that it's easier to make a difference by giving to politics.
Really.
So, if you're going to battle that, you really need to make sure that they know that they're having an impact. Because if you didn't tell them that, 6 more students could be educated because of you, or, we're closer to a cure for this disease because of you, they they move on. 54% of people don't even remember that they gave to you, or the next year they may not be afford to give to you. I see here that somebody is asking, where did I get the statistics from about
Right.
the retention rate of new donors, and that's from the Fundraising Effectiveness Project.
And we don't have a
So
way of putting that in right now, unfortunately, but you can look that up rather easily after this session. Fundraising Effectiveness Project is a great resource for that kind of information. We also, Poonam, had another comment here saying, should we be recognizing donors who prefer to give quietly? They aren't giving anonymously, but they want but they have expressed and that they don't want recognition. So this does come up from time to time. As you talk about the 4 R's, what do we do about those folks?
So you don't have to recognize them publicly if that's not what they want, but you could still thank them separately, one on one, or if you meet them with their children, make sure you tell their children, we are so grateful for your parents' generosity, because
Right.
you also got to build into the next generation. So
Sure.
there may be a quieter way. They probably want their children to know that they gave to you. So if you have the
Sure.
opportunity to be in a setting where their children are there, or their people that they feel comfortable with sharing, most people are willing to share with their parents and their children, if not with their friends. If
Right.
they may not want everybody to know, that's true. We try to encourage donors to share that they gave, because the credibility of one donor adds to the other donors giving. But people are affected by what their peers are doing. So, and most very sophisticated donors are aware of that and agree to it. But if that's not what they want, then the donor, if they want to be give quietly, that's fine. But that doesn't mean you forget to thank them. It does.
That
They,
isn't like
they
like those 2 organizations that never bothered to thank you last year. No.
yes, yes.
Which
And then
brings up
we have
another.
another one that then we have another one that I gave to, and I was trying to tell my husband, oh, we need to watch the gala, and he's like, yeah, well, maybe not. I really, and we turned the thing on, and we had given a very small amount compared to the other one that I talked about, who hasn't thanked me, and lo and behold, there was the MC saying, and thank you to so and so and so and so. And there was our name. And he was like, sat up, paid attention, and he was now listening to the gala, because obviously, there's nothing like hearing your name. so, so
Yes,
keep
that's
that in
very
mind.
powerful. That's very powerful. Actually, just saying somebody's name. And when you talked about talking to family members too, that's so, we often think about recognition as a big name on a building, and that's important for some people. But there's a lot that you gain from knowing that your children are proud of you, or if you're a child, knowing that your parents are proud of you. That subtle recognition is very meaningful. We did have another question also from Brent earlier, so I'm sorry I skipped over that, Brent, to say that that we'll likely address this. I'm not sure that's true. So if any of you have questions, please don't assume we'll address it. But the shrinking percentage of a number, rather, of donors, is that a generational matter? Or is that, because maybe there's a continually growing number of nonprofits? Is philanthropy being spread more thinly? What's the genesis, do you think, Poonam, of this kind of shrinking donor pool?
Well, I mentioned the Tax Cut and Jobs Act of
Mm.
2017. That made a huge difference. They expected it would make a difference. It did make a difference. I think we lost a third of our donors there. So and of course, on the not the very high net worth, because for them the tax deduction is still valuable, but the middle and upper middle, they started bunching and they gave less.
Mhm.
So we lost there, and that's where I said they went into politics things. Then there is, of course, the growing income inequality. We cannot get away from that. So there is a shrinking. The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. So we hear in the news. And if that's the case, then naturally you're and we as donors, as fundraisers, are being told to focus on the top of the pyramid as well. So all of us are lavishing a lot of attention on the top donors, and maybe this is the time a wake up call to think about. Yes, think about the middle income donors too, the middle level donors. They're not so flash in the pan. Once they start giving, if you continue to cultivate them, and they're very loyal. This
Mm.
organization that I continued giving, even though they didn't thank me and they didn't send me a thank you note, I've been giving to them for 20 years.
Wow.
So every
Oh.
year for 20 years, I have been giving to them. And in fact, the second time I gave to them was because I felt guilty because they were having this event. And they said, oh, you know, this is our 20th anniversary. And my husband and I looked at each other and said, oh, we got to send them another gift. It's the 20th anniversary. You know, we've been engaged with them for 20 years. And not only don't they have a planned giving program to solicit us, but uh, no one thought to look down the list and say, how many donors do we have for our 20th anniversary who gave to us for 20 years? How do we recognize them? Have you ever received a note from any charity saying, this is your fifth gift to us? You've been giving to us for 10 years. In these
Hmm.
10 years, we've achieved this much. We wouldn't have been able to do it without you. I don't,
Yeah.
and no one sent me that letter. We did
Well,
have
maybe
once.
hopefully one of those people is here in the room with us and can remind their organization to send that letter. But
I mean, it's such a simple
this is
thing.
not right. It is a
This is
simple
a
thing,
use
and it's
of your
not
database.
isolated.
This
Right.
is a use of your database. You know, when you go in your database and you look and you see that your new donor is the child of your former donor, maybe person who's still alive, maybe somebody who's deceased. You know, these
Mm-hmm.
are things you can find out by being in your database and making notes in your database. So you find something out, you must
Hmm.
note it in your database because otherwise you will not know. And the donor is expecting that you know this.
Right. That's the
So
part of the reporting elements of the 4 Rs is to make sure that's recorded, reported,
yes,
and then you can
yes,
re-engage. We did have
yes,
people asking about the different types of acknowledgements, which can be very effective, and you're touching on some of that. And when we were talking about this before the presentation today, you talked about the 7 thank yous. And that's not something that
yes.
everybody knows about. Would you share something about the 7 thank yous? What are they? Why are they important? How powerful are they?
Well, the seven thank yous doesn't mean that you say thank you, thank you, thank you 7 times. It's different ways. It's different ways of making the donor feel appreciated.
Hmm.
And it could be, of course, one of them has to be the tax receipt. It's most important. And the other is going to be the instant, if you have it, if they sent it online, the immediate receipt that you get, thank you so much for your gift because you did it online. Now if you didn't do it online, then you definitely should get something. And then depending on if it's over $100, over $1,000, depending on what your cutoffs are and how big a charity you are, and you know, uh, you'll get a note from somebody in the organization, hopefully a PS to the tax receipt or a separate note or something. So that's, we got into two or three right there. But then there's always your annual report. There's probably some cultivation event. I think we have some people here from the Clay Arts Center attending today, and they're another little charity that I've been giving to. And one of the things that people give to is 60% of people give because somebody they know asked them. So this is a charity that I actually, well, I love the arts, so that's great. But I really have no talent with clay. And so why am I giving to the Clay Arts Center? Because my very good friend is the founder of that center.
Hmm.
So, you give because people are associated with it. It's the credibility of that person. I know they do good work. They provide scholarships to children in the community. They do all sorts of wonderful things. And I love art. So I don't know anything much. You wouldn't think that if you came to my apartment because you would see a lot of pottery there. And the reason I have the pottery is because I'm trying to support the Clay Arts Center. So no matter that I don't know much about pottery, I still purchase some because, because of the person, because of the person. So similarly, it's very important to know that who or why that person gave, to you.
Yes. And when
Uh,
you say to know, the thing is, if let's say if someone here works for the organization and they know, that doesn't necessarily mean it's recorded. Maybe you can talk a bit about that because part of research is learning something, but then another part is conveying it.
Yes.
What's the importance of
So,
recording some of this information in a way that can be acted on continually over time to maintain these relationships?
well, good databases have fields for these kinds of things. So I was talking with a client of ours actually, and a charity that I also very strongly believe in. And they said, well, we got this money and it's from a donor advised fund. And of course, we are a research firm, so they're trying to ask me if I could find the address so they could send a thank you directly. And I was like, yeah, probably we can find you the address, but it, you know, if the donor didn't give you the address, maybe that's not the right place to send it. I said, how did they come to you? How did this money come to you through the donor advised fund? Well, it's our board member so and so who introduced us to them. And I was, well, did you tell your board member that they sent you this money? And that they sent you this money and they sent you another gift, later on. It didn't occur to them. And that's so important because the main reason, and that's why I use that example of my friend that I give to that charity because of my friend. This other organization also, they were getting this gift because of that person. So if that person knows, they would encourage them, they would thank them. There's another thank you right there. You remember we were talking about the 7 thank yous? It's not okay,
Right.
enough that we are thanking them, but the person who asked. Now, with the person where my friend, where I gave, she wrote me a personalized thank you note. Regardless of what the organization did, she called me up to say, where are you parking? Can I find you parking? Because, I was a little late coming to the event. I mean, there was so much care and attention taken for maybe a very small gift. And then
Mhm.
they had to, of course, they sent all the tax receipts and all that. But then they also immediately, within a month or so, they had a sale of pottery or something. And they said, well, we're opening the sale at, I don't know, 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock, something. And an hour before, we're going to have wine and cheese for our VIP donors like you to come and attend. Now, maybe I went, maybe I didn't go. I probably didn't go. I just remember feeling a good glow that they appreciated, not only relying on the fact that I gave because of my friend, but they said, well, the donation was to our charity, and we should appreciate the gift, regardless of the reason why the person gave. And you have that little warm glow saying, okay, they didn't forget. It's a month later, they remembered that I bought a VIP ticket. And then you move on from there. You might not make use of the invitation, but you have that remembrance that they appreciated it. Because so many times, one of the reasons that in the research that's been done is people don't remember that they gave, so they don't give again. People think that the charity didn't need their money. That's how I feel about them. Even though I thought, well, 20 years and I've been giving to them, I still felt I gave them half the amount I gave them previously, but I still felt guilty enough to give. And on the other hand, we had another cause that I give to, and they called me up end of the year when I had already assigned all my gifts.
Mhm.
But such a beautiful thank you call. I had to make a gift, and I felt guilty that the gift was not larger because they thanked me for a relatively small gift, and I felt guilty.
Now,
And
Poonam, I know that you've given us actually more than 7, but a number of people are saying, "Wait, can we go over the 7 again?" So let me make
yes,
sure at least I heard some of these. So I know you
yes,
said the digital receipt, of course,
yes,
is a it should be in
yes,
our software. So
yes.
hopefully that's there. So that's one. Another one is
Hmm.
some kind of physical receipt, right? Or
Yes,
not receipt
yes,
necessarily, but thank you. Some kind of physical
yes,
acknowledgement through the
yes,
mail. Unless people say they don't
yes,
want that, that's a nice thing to do. You talked
yes,
about, let me see, the recognition that can come at an event. I know you
yes.
mentioned,
That's
like
very
the one that,
important. You have a cultivation event, a webinar, a party in the
sure,
park, whatever you can do in these days, a lunch and
okay.
learn. We have some people on here that are friends of that are clients of ours, and they have a lunch and learn. It's very successful.
And then I know you
So
mentioned a year end, kind of a roundup when, so here are the gifts you've given over the year, over 20 years. So there's another one I know that's at least 4.
one,
You've mentioned a bunch of
one,
others, but are there other,
yes,
if someone was
annual
making a
report.
checklist, What would they
Yes.
include besides those, perhaps?
The annual report, of course.
Oh, that's right. So
And
that's
you
5.
know that if they forgot to thank me, I'm not going to be in the annual report. They
Right.
don't even have a
That's true.
record of my gift. I mean, this is good. And because I know other people who give to that charity, and I'm giving again because of somebody that, it's embarrassing for me to think that the person thinks, well, I solicited her and she didn't give.
Right.
So that's very important, not to leave somebody out of the annual report. Make sure it's accurate. And then, of
Absolutely.
course, if you see them at the event, you know, make sure
Right.
that you thank them, but also make your CEO or somebody else from the charity, maybe a board member that they would like to meet, that person thanks them. So it's recognition. It's also thank you. So there are multiple, and then creative ways. Maybe you thank them at Valentine's day or Thanksgiving. You send a little thing. I mean, as I said, February is a terrible month. The one thing that you can use it for is thanking people. Because if you received a
Absolutely.
year-end gift, January, you're maybe still trying to make things get in the database and things like that. Make sure all your acknowledgements are sent out. But February, what are you doing in February? You have to use that chance to thank the donors. Maybe send them a survey saying, you're a new donor to us. Please tell us what brought you to us. What do you like about us? I mean, there are so many things you can learn, and so many new donors are coming from far away places. So sending
Yes.
out a survey is a good way of learning more about them. Of course,
Right.
calling them is the best,
And that's
and
great
that's
data
I think
again.
yes,
Yes.
and that's one more. I think we've skipped over the calling
Thank
because
you. That's number 7.
yes,
That's right. So that phone call.
yes,
And I have to say, a few people have mentioned in the chat a couple of things. One is that sometimes the mails have been, well, we all know this. The mails have been really difficult the
yes,
last
yes,
couple of years for a variety of reasons. So we do acknowledge that. We know that's true. There have been some staffing issues because there's been an issue about the great, the great,
yes,
what
resignation.
were people calling it? The great resignation, but
Yes,
also some staffing issues because of COVID. There have been financial issues. So we understand all of that, and we do want to acknowledge it. It's important. But there was another comment that was mentioned that was kind of interesting, and I wonder what you think about this, Poonam. It's that, as Patrick had said, do you think it might seem disjointed if an organization is sending out multiple thank yous from different members and board members and so forth, and they're all coming at you? What do you think about that? If
it should be
if
sort
we're
of
sending out a
sequenced.
multitude,
It should be sort of sequenced. So you get the official acknowledgement, and then maybe the higher up, depending on how much the donor gave and how much time you have to spend on this, you
hmm,
you send a higher level gift, and then the other one could be in person. Now, one of the best, I know we have some prep school or independent school people, and the best thank you that I heard about from a prep school, and I can tell you a disaster story too, but let's talk about the good story, was the phone rang and this person picked up, and there's a new donor, and there's a lady on the other end of the phone, and she said, I just wanted to call and thank you. I'm just a volunteer, parents committee volunteer or something. That's assigned to thanking donors. And I wanted to thank you particularly. And I just want to let you know that my son is on the same tennis team as your son. And yesterday I watched, and this is a boarding school. And yesterday I watched your son play, and he was, he did very well. Whether he lost the match or won the match, we don't care. But the point was, she was a local parent, and the parent was far away. And to have a mother actually call you and say, I watched your son play and he played very well and he's got such a sportsman-like attitude or whatever, I mean, who's not going to give again after that? And
right?
that's a
And
volunteer call. That's not even an official, you know.
right,
So when
I
people
have
say
to.
they're short-staffed,
As
go
you're
ahead.
talking about this, though, it strikes me that I know that we have to keep our thought process on how do we make sure there is revenue for mission. That's why we're all in this field. But at the same time, let's imagine that we're all paid for, that we had that terrible, wonderful gift of the one donor who paid for everything. And some of us have been in organizations like that. It's not It's not the best case scenario. It's really not. But let's imagine that's where we are, and we have other people who care about us. Wouldn't we still want to do all these things just because they're the right thing to do? I mean, if I saw someone's kid playing in a tennis match and I knew they weren't there, and it was an opportunity for me to reach out to that person and just say, I saw your kid play tennis. It was so great. Now of course, we also get revenue from it, but isn't it just the right thing to do?
Well, but you have to be on the parents committee to get the person's number.
Oh, no, of course.
So, so
But I'm
I
just
mean,
thinking as a matter of principle.
it would be an assignment that, as you
Of
said, it has
course.
to be coordinated. Now, this lady obviously went above and beyond and or paid attention. Oh, I've got this list. I've done calls for various institutions that my children have attended, where
Mhm.
you're on the parents committee, you have to make these calls. I don't think I was ever as creative as that, but you have the list. You have some time to think about it,
Right.
and you might talk to your child about, well, I'm going to be calling so and so, what's he like, something. You
Mhm,
may give
mhm.
it a little flavor, but those calls are more valuable because they are people, that's the peer to peer connection.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We
So
did we did have a comment from Julia who had said, "Can you say more about phone call thank yous and the kinds of approaches that have worked?" Do you have any thoughts on that, Poonam?
well, first of all, you need to have a script prepared to make sure that you're saying the right thing. And then, depending on how creative the person is, they might veer from the script. Depending on, you might find something in common. You may find they gave to the drama program and drama is your thing. And you might say something about that, that you gave to
Mhm.
the drama program and something, I've had that where I was working at one time at a charity that, it was an arts charity. And I got into a conversation when I was thanking the donor about something totally unrelated. But that's fine. That happens rarely. Most of the time, you're actually making a thank you call with a proper script, and you should have some leading questions of, you know, what brought you to us? What programs do you like? If the person is willing to engage. If they're not willing to engage, then you just leave a voicemail. You didn't even get to them, maybe sometimes.
Mm.
These days, it's very hard to get to donors in New York because many people, especially last year, most donors were not in the city. They had moved to wherever they decided, their homes or other places, and they were hard to reach. But at least you left the voicemail with the message that you wanted to, what you did with
Right.
the money, what you're going to do with the money if you called soon enough, and how much you appreciate them, because you're reminding them that they gave so they can give again. If one of the causes of not giving is that you forgot, or that you feel that charity doesn't need your money, then this little reminder is going to help a lot.
Right.
and
You
and,
know,
and then you remember, let's not forget about the research.
mhm. I
Go
was going
ahead.
to say, it also strikes me, and maybe the research talks about this, that we the donors may not remember that they were thanked either. I mean, I know that it's helpful to thank them, but maybe one of the benefits of doing this in different ways on a sequence that's thought out throughout the year is a way of reminding them of the relationship that's important to them because they're busy too. So if they received an acknowledgement immediately after a gift on December 31st and they received it on January 5th, by the time it's mid February and they're thinking about family, or it's March and they're thinking about tax season, or it's May and they're thinking about the summer vacation, or whatever it is, already that little acknowledgement we did is far in the distant past. So I wonder if one of the benefits
Yes,
is of
yes,
frequency is reminding them that they're also appreciated.
yes. A lot of charities have newsletters, and some people list donors in their newsletters. So that would be, one of your 6 or 7 different, apart from the annual report, it's also in the newsletter. You might recognize them if it's a recognizable name, or if it's something unique about their gift, or you're trying to encourage other gifts like that. You might feature them in the newsletter
Mhm.
as a, giving a testimonial of why they give, and that reinforces to them why they give, because they were asked. So it makes them think. How often when you talk about something you do, you associate it with it more. So if somebody were
Right.
actually to call them and say, we'd like to feature your photograph, and in the newsletter, then they start to think about, yeah, why do I give to them? Oh, because they work with rhinos in Assam, and I grew up in Assam in India, or in Africa, whatever, and that's why this, you know. So it reminds you of why, which is
Why
also important.
you're
The
involved.
donor connects more deeply. Everything you are doing is trying to connect the donor more deeply with your cause. So anything that you can do to make them more strongly connected to your cause, the caring is stronger, and therefore they give more from their heart. They feel appreciated,
Right.
and
Now,
that's
we
important.
did we did have a note from KP earlier, and this might be a tactical consideration, but I think there's more to it than that. KP had asked in the annual report, what donation threshold do you include? Is it $1,000? Is it $10,000? But of course, that relates to budget as well as how much you ask for. There are a lot of factors, but maybe this is a chance to talk about our definition of what's important and the donor's definition of what's important. In other words, do we treat people who are giving us $25 in one way and $25,000 another way? What are your thoughts about both the recognition in terms of practical considerations like an annual report, but
Yes.
also just in terms of how to treat these middle donors who just came in by December
Yes.
31st?
Well, the middle donors, a lot of organizations have what they call a concierge program or a mid-level program, and that actually is where I fit in with this one where I told you that it was a small gift, but they
Mm-hmm.
had the calling program, and so they called and thanked. And that's usually what a concierge level program is, that you do call and thank. You may not take them out to lunch, which you might do for a more schedule a meeting, but you are still in touch with them by
Mm-hmm.
phone, by email, you know, in other ways which are more mass marketing. The probably the most personalized one would be the phone call, because you cannot afford to take everybody out to lunch or have a cultivation event for everyone, and depending on what your charity is. We I was teaching once in Boston, and we had a big room, and a lot of my research friends from very large institutions, because it was a
Mm-hmm.
snowstorm, I said, please come, there'll be nobody in the room, please come. So they all turned up in great numbers, and so there were the small organizations, and then there were these large educational institutions, universities, and their major idea of a major gift could be everything from
Mm-hmm.
100,000 to a billion. They have a rating for a person who could give them $1 billion gift. Now that is not a realistic. We don't have a program, maybe, if you're a small charity. If somebody gave you $1 billion, you wouldn't know what to do with it. But so for you, $1,000 may be a very major gift, and so you may then list donors from $100 up or 250 up or whatever. You want to make it look as attractive as possible, as full and as plentiful. I mean, you want to show off your donors, so you usually will plan the categories based on where you have more donors. So if you have a lot of
Now,
donors at 1,000 up and $100 up, then choose that. If you have plenty of donors at 250 up and nothing at 100, then start at a higher level. So try to make it look that you have supporters. People give to people, to causes that other people support. It's
yes.
easier to get, you know.
And
So
Poonam,
your credibility matters.
I know that one of the things that struck me about that was it's a program. It's, so there's a concierge program or a mid-level program, or some people have onboarding programs, but these are all decisions that we make internally to make sure that every person who supports our work feels an appropriate level of attention. And
Yes.
that program is designed in advance of when the gifts come in, so that we don't forget them by accident as the year progresses. I mean, somebody inevitably will leave because they go to
Yes.
another opportunity, they get sick, there's maternity leave, there are staffing changes. That doesn't mean that the donors are forgotten. So I know that makes it tough for us, but it's not impossible. Um, one of the things that somebody raised though earlier was Megan, who had just said, do you have any advice for organizations that don't have in-person events? This is something we've all been living through, and trying to find the right kinds of ways of engaging in your 4 Rs, but
Yes,
also recognizing
yes, yes,
that's been challenging. So what are your thoughts
yes.
for places that do most of their programming online?
Thank you. That's very good question, because I also wanted to answer somebody else's question, who was asking what is a lunch and learn,
Oh, yes.
and this
Thank you.
is when you get a gift in unrestricted gift, year-end gift, or event gift. When you have no idea of which program, especially a social service agency or something where you have multiple programs, which program are they interested in? So when you talk to them, you have a little better idea what to talk to them about. So a lunch and learn would be where you bring your own lunch. It's online, and this is something that one of our clients has actually been doing, and we've attended a few of them. And then your CEO is there, the program director is there. Maybe you might have a testimonial from somebody who's benefited from the program, and you talk about the program. And especially during the pandemic, it's been one way of saying, we are still doing our work, and this is how we're doing our work. We've had all these obstacles because we couldn't go in to see people. The elderly, we had to stand outside and talk to them and make sure that they were still okay, because normally we would have gone in and checked on them. And so many different uh, creative ways that they thought of to keep doing the programs that they had been doing, whether they were doing them online. So then you present this through a Zoom session, and people actually do sign on.
Mhm.
And the same thing with talking about events that are virtual. I know a specific case of Jazz at Lincoln Center, right when the pandemic started, was about to have their big gala, and they had to make it virtual. Well, they luckily for them, they had most of the money raised. This is what I hear. But by making it virtual, they had people attending from all over the world, not just in the country, but all over the
Mhm.
world, because they
Mhm.
opened it up. And jazz is an American art form, an American music form, and so who wouldn't want to listen to a program that Jazz at Lincoln Center is putting out? If you know that you can sign on for free, and a lot of those programs were for free. And we have another client, the Irish Rep Theatre, and they started putting out all their plays for free. I've listened to National Theatre Live for free. They were putting out their plays, and then those who have the wherewithal to give will send gifts, because they know you haven't been charged. Now the Met Opera has recently started charging to attend the virtual concerts. Well, in between now, they probably are. You're able to attend it in person. Now we can attend in New York the Met Opera in person. But during those months when you couldn't attend in person, at first they were all free, and then they started charging a little bit. Uh, but the point is, they started to get gifts because it was virtual from all over the world, all over the country, and they actually increased their donor database by this. So
Right.
it opened up. So you never know. Something which seems terrible ends up being an amazing new uh, thing that helps the cause. The Irish Rep suddenly was getting donors from Texas that would never have thought to give to them. So it,
We have a question about how to budget for these types of fundraising. And I know these types can mean a lot of things because our conversation has gone from virtual to physical. It's talking about new donors, but it's also talking about people maybe we haven't paid enough attention to have been giving to us for a while. But as we think forward and we imagine life maybe post, COVID, what kinds of things are you advising people to do and think about in terms of budgeting? And I might add to that question, not just budgeting dollars, but also budgeting staff. Because one of the questions here is, if you want to make phone calls, like Jerry Panos used to talk about, call every donor at the American Diabetes Association or something. I can't remember where he said, call every donor over $100. If you want to make phone calls like that, you have to have staff or volunteers to do it. How do you budget for the people and the resources to do the kind of things that we're talking about?
well, of course, we talked about having the volunteers helping in some, and I think that's quite effective, because also, you want to give board members the chance to, or committees or whatever, chance to participate. And this is a very easy thing. Nobody wants to ask for money, but they're very happy to do thank yous.
Mm-hmm.
And then they get to network. So, and this time when you can't really be in touch with people, having the volunteers do the cultivation for you can be very helpful. And it's also a good chance for you to learn about your donor. So you might restrict it to people over a certain gift level, in terms of budget, and then others don't get it. But if you can bring it down by using volunteers or staff on, cold winter days when they don't have something else to do, or off season, and, that would be great. But you also need to think, apart from the phone calls. We talked a lot about phone calls. Think about what it is that you're reading when you're looking at your list of donors, especially say your new donors. What made them come? Where do they live? What kind of
Mm-hmm.
people are they? Are they all over 70? Or are they, young millennials? If they're young millennials, they may not want to talk to you on the phone. They may rather prefer getting a video. Thank you. And that's great. Then it saves you having to send that. So you do need to segment and look at who these people are, by and then decide the budget based on that. If they're all in one geographic area and one town because you're a local nonprofit, it's much easier to plan a little event in somebody's backyard or something. But then if they're all over the country or all over the world, well, you got to think about that. You got to think about time zones, and when should you plan a virtual event, which then, the maximum number of people in your database can attend, or your new donors can attend. So you need to give some thought. And also, you don't want to spend, talking about budget, you also don't want to have to create very expensive new events just because you feel the need to cultivate. You have to look at your calendar within your charity to see what it is you're already doing and how you can incorporate the development piece into something. So we
Right.
we had a client, the Broward Community College Foundation, a long time ago in Florida, and they uh, wanted to thank actually their faculty who were giving, and some of the older donors. And they found that they were already doing a concert on Valentine's Day
Oh,
in
wow.
in their auditorium. So they're like, oh, this is a no-brainer. We'll just invite people to this event. We already have the event, and we'll give them
Right.
lunch.
Right.
And they're mostly older people. They're not going to come out for a gala or a evening cocktail party. They don't drive at that time. So by inviting them to the lunch concert, solved all the problems. The event was already there. They didn't have to create an event. So
Right.
if you look through what's happening in your uh, you know nonprofit, you will find that there are things that you can just, you could do a tour, something exciting. You're loading the truck, uh, to send supplies to something. You can have a tour of the facility. It depends on what your donors seem to like. It's You got to think about, these are my 20 new donors I got in. So why did I get these donors, and what do they care about? Do they want to come in and see the new kiln at the Clay Art Center? Do they want to attend a private little webinar or little Zoom session with the star of the new production? You know, it's it could be in person, but it could be also by Zoom if that's all you can do in this,
Sure.
virtual. It's still exciting to meet Liam Neeson or whoever is on.
Yes.
I mean, he's
I'd like to
on a
meet
Zoom
Liam Neeson.
call and hear why he's in this production and what he thinks about the playwright, or have the playwright themselves. I mean, uh, art organizations have the best time with this because they can do so many wonderful creative
Indeed.
events, you
Yes.
know. But it's
Poonam,
it's the others. Yes.
I did want to pose this question, which came in earlier from Andrea, and this one is very nuanced as well, because maybe it's hard to measure what doesn't happen. She asked, how do you evaluate the effectiveness of your thank you calls? But this might also be for other thank you elements, but thank you calls in her case. We've always started and then stopped because we couldn't see a return. Now, before you answer this, I want to go back for those who are joined us maybe a little bit late, where you talked about retention, because some of the things you're discussing with us are ways of making sure we don't lose revenue, as opposed to that we gain revenue. But you've been talking about how showing the love can do a bit of both. But in the case of her organization, it looks like they weren't able to measure the return on investment of making thank you calls. What are your thoughts about that?
Oh, I'm so happy you asked me this question, because I was thinking about this yesterday, as a matter of fact. And I was thinking, which board of any charity that you have been associated with has ever asked the ED or the development director, what is your retention rate? They're always asking, how many new donors did you bring in? But did anybody ever ask, what is your retention rate? How many donors did you retain? How long have you retained those donors? Nobody's thinking about that. No board is thinking about that. No ED is thinking about that. This charity that I gave to for 20 years, how many of those other people have they lost that have been giving for 20 years, or are likely to lose, or are dropping, from their database because they don't feel appreciated, or have lowered their gift? In my case, because I gave for so long, I still gave, but I reduced the size of the gift. So if you're not looking at your retention rate, if nobody above you, if the development director is only going to be judged on how many new donors they brought in and not on how many they retained, then you will not see the return on investment, because no one's looking at it.
Right.
And it is 10 times more expensive to bring in one new donor than it is to retain somebody. Because as much as you're just talking about, make phone calls, make this, or create an event, all of that is much less than buying a list and creating a thing, or whatever you are going to do to bring in a new donor.
And I think also, Poonam, when we were preparing for this, I think you mentioned that that one of the other hidden kind of opportunities and costs in all this is when we don't factor in this acquisition cost. And this is a problem, because one of the elements of acquisition cost is sometimes people test us with their gifts. That we might look at a donor and just see $100 and we think, oh, it's a $100 donor. But there are a couple of factors, right? I mean, one is long-term donor value. And in case people aren't familiar with that expression, that's something we could talk about, but I know Poonam could talk about it all day. But it's really about what the economic opportunity is long-term if you retain the relationship. But then another one is sometimes people give us a gift and we think that's a $100 donor, but they're not at all. The research you're talking about will help us to see where there's opportunity, but they might be testing us to see how we respond, if we thank them, if we care. Could you talk about that a little bit before we close?
Yes. So there are two points there. One is the long-term value of the donor, because if the person gives again, if they give a second time, the rate of retaining them goes up to 60%. So that's the reason why today's topic was maximize your work with your new year-end donors, because otherwise you're going to lose them. But look at the difference between keeping 4 and keeping 60%. How much more is that? If you keep 4 out of 20, or you keep 60% out of the 20, that's a lot of difference, right? If out of 100 you're keeping 20 and you're keeping 60, think of all the money that you just added to your bottom line because once they gave 60% of them gave back again, then they're going to continue giving again and again, because it's the second gift solidifies their loyalty to you also. So that's why this is so important. But what was your second part of the question?
It was really about that, and also using research, because research here will also help to identify the people who are testing us, that that might be,
Yes.
sure, maybe an opportunity today, but it might also be a planned giving opportunity for us and for the
Yes.
donor. Donors are looking for
Yes.
opportunities just like we are looking for revenue.
Yes. Yes, so you're looking at you're doing the research. Of course, you're looking in the database, but you hopefully you have some tools to check the and see what are they giving to others. Oh, they gave me $100, but if I cultivate them, they will give. So there's capacity is very important, and the other things that you're looking for are caring and connection. So when
Mhm.
you're doing the research, which is important to do, and again, it's something like I don't have the luxury, I don't have a staff member. uh, you know there are firms like ours that do this type of work, and we do it in small bits for small charities. And so there is something that you can do, even if you have a small number of donors and you don't have any tools. You can still do something, because you must, people expect you to know about them, and you must research them, and you must put what you find about them into the database. you know they give to the ballet because her mother was a ballet dancer, or his wife was a former ballet dancer. That's why he joined our board. That's got to be somewhere. Very
Yes.
often we research these things, and people are like, really? Nobody told us. I'm the third development director since the man joined the board. We didn't know that his wife was a ballet dancer. That came up in the research.
Right.
So you really do. We had a doctor once we did for a hospital, and you know his father-in-law was the richest man in Mexico at one point. They didn't know that. And he was doing all sorts of exchange programs between Mexico and Israel, but they didn't think to talk to them about exchange programs in Mexico from New York or any other funding needs. So if you don't look and learn about your donors, it's important. You must learn about your donors. And when they come in new is the time to learn about them. And research is one of the tools.
And I know we could spend a whole session talking about that because you've done so much for so many organizations on research. But I know also we're coming up to an hour. We have more questions coming in that we haven't been able to answer. But I just want to say one thing, which is that not only have we gained a lot from this discussion, but we've also got 3 different sets of alphabets. We've got, or maybe 2 in the set of numbers, right? You gave us the 7 different ways to thank people, which is so essential to this whole retention thing, but also because it's human. The 4 R's, right? Which, for people who are writing these notes, I have research, report, re-engage, and recognize. And then you just gave us the 3 C's, which I wasn't expecting, and I wrote those down. So here we're talking about what is that again? Capacity, caring, and
Capacity,
connection.
yes. And this is
Yes,
this is if you're doing research,
right.
because you could get caught up in anything when you're looking at into people, reading about people. But keep that in mind. You're a development professional. You're looking for the connection. You're looking for, do they care about this, and how can I make them care about it? Maybe they don't care about these 6 other programs, but they care about this particular. They care about musical theater and not about plays or whatever. So the more you know, the better you can bring them closer to you.
Right.
So
Thank you so much for all this, Poonam. And speaking of connection, how can people connect with you? How can people learn about your work and be in touch?
thank you. Thank you for
How,
asking. Our website is prasadconsulting.com, very easy. And there's a little link. You can just write to me and it comes straight to me. And I'd love to hear from you anytime if you have any questions.
please do check out her work. And if you don't, and if you're not doing that just through her website, remember she's in a lot of places talking about a lot of things with a lot of people. If you're part of the Giving Institute in some way or other, including their summer symposium, sometimes you can get a golden ticket to that. If you're not a member, check that out. If you're interested in what's going on with Fundraising Day, among the many things done at AFP New York, where she is the central figure, I hope you'll check that out. That will be live this year, I think. Is that right? Are you
Yes,
going to be
yes, in
live in
person,
person?
in
Wow.
person at at
So
the Marriott
let's.
Marquis on June 17th.
I know that hotel for that conference well, and we'll cross our fingers for good health. I'm sure it'll be a fantastic program. And you can find out lots more about what Poonam does at her website, of course. So check that out. And we're seeing lots of thank yous. So I just want to pass those along. If you like this content, I hope you'll join us for the rest of the sessions in the series. brought to you, of course, by DonorSearch. Our thanks to them. If you want to know more about them and connect once again with them, you can do that right on your page. You'll see a little place where you can click the link and learn more about DonorSearch. They can tell you a lot about your donors. They won't tell you everything that someone like Poonam would, but they'll tell you a heck of a lot. And maybe the most important thing is just to say thank you, because of course, without them, we would never be able to have conversations like this one. We have 90 of these this year, including a podcast we just dropped today that's really wonderful that you're going to love to hear. So if you like podcasts and you like to hear about people working in our field, check out the Philanthropy Masterminds podcast. That's something you won't want to miss. And look for the rest of the calendar at donorsearch.net under the resources tab, where these webinars and webcasts are held throughout the year, at least once every week. So we'll look forward to seeing you sometime soon, if not at the Marriott Marquis. So till then, take care, stay healthy. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.